have every, oh, I'll restart that because the recording's now in progress.
Sorry, I forgot it.
Thanks, Roger. As he said, my name is Greg Drobny. I'm the recruiter for Code Platoon here. Most of you, I think I've probably either spoken with or exchanged emails with. If I have not already, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me, email me, greg@codeplatoon.org, super simple. And I will happily answer whatever questions you've got. Again, as I said, I'm the recruiter, so I'm kind of the front-facing person, the first person that most people talk to. I'm also the SkillBridge representative. So for any of you who are still active duty, if you're not talking to me already, you need to, because I will definitely help walk you through that process. I'm here to help you do that. I'm not here to be a gatekeeper. I'm here to make sure we do everything we can to help you get into this program. So in that way, I'm a facilitator. I'm not going to tell you not to, but I'm going to help you get where you need to go. So on that note, though, there are other people on the call tonight who are more expert in some of the areas that I may talk to you about, but they're going to be able to give you much more detail. For example, if you ask me funding questions, I can certainly give you the basics of funding, but Tish, who is here tonight, is going to be able to give you much more detail. So I'll kick it over to her. She can do an introduction, and then we can go from there. That is, if she's the next on the list. I don't know. Yes, she is.
Hiya. Thanks, Greg. Hello, everyone. As Greg mentioned, my name is Tish Johnson, and I'm the Student Support and Compliance Manager with Code Platoon. So basically, I handle all things financial aid related. So firstly, I would like to talk about the different paths that you can choose to attend Code Platoon as far as funding goes. So we have several options. The first one is GI Bill, which is available to all qualifying veterans, active duty service members, military spouses, and dependents. The GI Bill can be used for in-person attendance as well as remote attendance. Now, I will say for remote attendance, this is a new initiative for us, and it's a reimbursement option. So what that means is there's a form to complete that I would give you. You would send it to the VA once you're enrolled. We have to verify your enrollment. The VA will pay you, the student, and then you will be responsible for paying us. Now, with this option, unfortunately, the monthly housing stipend is not available. However, we are offering a housing scholarship to help offset costs if you choose this option. We also accept VRE benefits. You can use VRE with us in person or remotely. And also for that, you would need to most likely work with a voc rehab counselor as well as myself to make sure that we have that process for you on time and all of your payments are good to go and things like that. Lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about Code Platoon scholarships, which are available for everyone, veterans, military spouses, dependents, and active duty service members as well. Our scholarships are available in person and remote. We have full and partial scholarships, and this also includes affinity scholarships for women in tech, transgender, Black and Hispanic, and more. So we're basically committed to providing generous scholarships to our students. In 2023, for example, we awarded over $1.6 million in scholarships. That's just to give you an idea of how generous Code Platoon is with regards to attending the program using the scholarship option. So I just want to say thank you. Does anyone have any questions? My email is tish@codeplatoon.org. Feel free to ask me now, or you can email me on your own if you like. Thank you so much.
Sorry for that. My internet is acting up, so I do apologize for that. Next, we have Catherine for Career Services.
Thank you. Look, I don't have anything. It looks blank. That is not what it is intended to be, but because we are not blank. But I am Catherine Burns. I'm in Career Services. I'm the coordinator. I work with Rich Luby, so we are a two-person team. We come in during the cohort while you're doing the class, but we really try to focus on just learning programming while you're in the class. And after you graduate, Career Services takes over. We have a roadmap. We will work with you for 6 months or until however long it takes you to get a job. But we focus in on resume review, teaching interview best practices using the STAR method. We talk about networking, branding. We talk about salary negotiation. We talk about a whole host of things in career services. So when we're working with students, our focus is trying to help you, become career ready and get a job. But half our time is also spent working with companies and trying to find you job placements. It's quite a bit of a balance. And whether you're in the immersive, full stack, or an evening weekends, or the DevOps, we have volunteers come in and work with you on resumes. We also have mock interview days to practice technical and behavioral interviewing, so you get ready for your job application skills. And then what else? We really work on networking a ton. So it's something that we take really seriously here. So it's not like we're going to give you lip service and, help you one time and then that's it. If we have people coming back, alumni, a year after they've had a job, they're looking for a new job, they just want to, re-edit their resume, we always willing to work with alumni. So that's career services in a nutshell. If you have any questions, my email is right there, Catherine@coplatoon.org. And hopefully you guys will be joining us, and then I'll work with you in 6 months or a year or whenever you finish. Thanks, Greg, for putting that in there.
I didn't want you to feel left out because your page was blank. I mean, that just,
Definitely not blank. It's a lot of extra work. We say co-platoon, getting through the cohort is really, really hard. Finding a job is really, really hard. So it's a full-time job to find a job, and we try and do our best to help you through that process.
that's when the real work begins. As I've told many people, Catherine and Rich are awesome, but just like any of you who have ever been deployed, as I was telling, I think I told Travis this today, anybody who's been deployed, you know that when you get back from a deployment, there are a certain number of people who just disappear and vanish. Don't be that person. As long as you engage with Rich and Catherine, they are going to work super hard to help you out. And that's what they do very, very well. So as long as you stay motivated at the end, don't think that it's just over. You'll do great.
I think
Any
lost
Robert
Roger
having some issues.
I am so sorry. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but my
Yeah, I
internet
can
really
now.
hates me today. Yeah. Before we move on to me, does anybody have any questions for Greg, Catherine, or Tish about anything involving the program?
Anything at all. Like I said, if you're SkillBridge and you haven't already, definitely email me. That's very important. If you don't know what SkillBridge is, then you're not SkillBridge. So don't worry. If you're not active duty still, then you don't need to worry about SkillBridge. But if you are and you haven't spoken with me yet, please definitely email me. But beyond that, yeah, any other questions we can answer too. Anything at all.
Hey everybody, can you hear me?
Got it.
Perfect. Just want to make sure. As far as you guys saying there's a scholarship where you guys pay us, how does that work? How do you guys make money from that?
Well,
Tish, I don't know, you want to take that?
well, let me clarify. There are two scholarships. We have the traditional COPA-2 scholarship, which covers the cost of tuition, and that's either full or partial award, depending on which one you qualify for. The other scholarship I was speaking about is to offset the lack of housing allowance, that if you choose the reimbursement option, you basically wouldn't get a monthly housing stipend. So, but the tuition will be covered. So that would be roughly $4,000. But like I said, the rest of your GI Bill benefits will be applied to your tuition. So that's how we would get paid, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And just to address the second part of Travis's question for everyone's edification, I think this is important. He said, how do we make money at that? This is an organization, and there's a reason I've been here for 5 years. I've been out since 2009, but I've been here for 5 years. And one of the reasons is because Code Platoon truly does put its money where its mouth is. Code Platoon is a true nonprofit, and I cannot emphasize that enough. We put everything we possibly can back into the students. So when you ask, how do we make money at that? It's a mystery. It really is, because we put so much into making sure that students are taken care of. And I think that's really important, because I can tell you there are a lot of veteran organizations out there that may say that they do that, but they don't. Code Platoon truly does. So when it comes to things like tuition, we do everything possible that we can to make sure that tuition is not a barrier for attendance. This whole thing, this whole component that you're speaking of now with the GI Bill being used and reimbursement, that's a very new thing. So everyone's aware. Until very, very recently, we couldn't use the GI Bill for remote students. We had vet tech for a while, that went away. It probably will be coming back in about a year, but not right now. That's a whole other subject. But for right now, this is a very new thing that is a good thing. It's a very positive move that we've been able to take advantage of, remote use of GI Bill. So we're, work with us on that. It's a very good thing for students in general.
And there's a question in the chat, and I would just say before you answer that question, you still should come to Chicago because it's a great place to learn, and we have an awesome WeWork classroom, and you won't have to worry about the paying for your BAH. It'll be included if you use GI Bill.
To answer your question, yes, remote students qualify for the same scholarships. Women in tech, military spouse, yes, everyone that fits that category would apply for that scholarship. So it doesn't matter whether it's remote or in person.
Everything that Code Platoon does can be done remotely. And I think the important thing here is that you can do everything in Code Platoon remotely. The only difference is how much the VA will give you versus
Right.
not what Code Platoon will
Not
do.
us. Right.
It's the VA, right? But Code Platoon, you can do everything possible. We have alumni who have graduated Code Platoon without even being in the United States for the entirety of the program. So you absolutely do not have to be at Code Platoon. But like Catherine said, we love it if you come to Chicago. It's awesome. And Catherine just wants to take you out to see live shows at bars. Really, that's the main reason. But something about Chicago having good live music, I don't know, whatever.
You raised another question for me. I hope you're okay with this. As far as the VA goes, do you need a letter or a certificate of eligibility to actually participate in the program or get into it?
No, I would only need a certificate of eligibility for those who are intending to use their GI Bill benefits. So the traditional GI Bill. So if you're planning to come in person and you have benefits available that you like to use, then in that case, I would need your certificate of eligibility or statement of benefits.
Okay, thank you.
What are the requirements to receive a scholarship? As I was mentioning, we have affinity categories. So once you fill out the scholarship application, the scholarship committee reviews your application, and then I will let you know which one you will qualify for. So everyone will qualify for at least one. Veteran scholarship is a partial scholarship. The others, for the most part, are full with exceptions. But it's just a matter of which one, not if you would qualify based on the information you provide to us. Like, for example, if you belong to any affinity groups that we mentioned. Does it answer your question?
Anybody? Anything?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
We can, yes.
So my question is for you, Tish. So I actually am meeting with my VRNE counselor tomorrow. But I don't plan on starting until the June class. Is there anything that, because I know you said if we are going through VRNE, the two of you have to work together. So is there anything that I need from you before I meet with her tomorrow?
Not before. Honestly, each counselor is different. Most of the time, they do ask that I submit, and they'll give it to you like it's like a form to fill out for academic form. Some of them ask for it earlier than not, but it's nothing you need to prepare for the meeting. Normally, the counselor will tell you what they need from the school. So once you meet with them, let me know if they need something from me. I will certainly give it to you. And sometimes they ask for our tax ID information too.
Okay, and it's not gonna make a difference if I'm not starting in February because
For
initially I was
VRNE,
supposed
no,
to-
no. It'll be
Okay,
fine. You just let them know when you intend to start, and then we'll put that on the form.
okay, all
Mhm.
right, thank you.
Sure.
We got a couple questions in the chat.
Tips, pointers before my follow-up appointment on VR and E. I think the big thing, and this is, I was going to mention this anywhere for anybody who's wondering about VR and E just in general. It sounds like you've already gone to one VR and E appointment, so that's good. For those who haven't, or those who are going to their first VR and E appointment, just the biggest thing to be aware of is that it's not an education entitlement. And the reason I say that is because it's very important to not go in there with the idea that you're going to get them to pay for school. That's not what VRNE is for. They will pay for school. That's not what it exists for, though. So, for example, if you go in there and say, I want you to pay for my degree in X, they're probably going to say no. But if you go in there and say, I have this disability from, a service-connected disability that doesn't allow me to do X anymore, and now I want to do Y, and I can go to Code Platoon and it can help me do that, that's when they will help you out. So as long as you go in there with that understanding and do your homework, research. There are lawyers on YouTube who put out videos talking about how you can maximize your VRNE benefits that are really good. They're very informative, people who specialize in this. So just be aware of how VRNE operates. It's an employment program. They want you to get employed. Their goal is to help you get employed. Training, if they're going to pay for you to get training, is just the part of that path. So as long as you understand that going in, you should be pretty good. And do your homework, make sure that you have a plan and what to present to them. Let's see, what's next here. Is there a deadline to apply for scholarship? Tish, you want to take that one?
Well, it depends on your cohort. I was answering in the chat. Say, for example, if you're starting in February, most students will apply when they complete their enrollment paperwork. So after you've been accepted, you receive enrollment paperwork, and that includes the scholarship application. Once you submit that paperwork, you are told within a week or so which one you would be eligible for. So it's not a long process. It's just a matter of getting to that point. Before that, we have a scholarship eligibility form on our website, which you can get an idea of which scholarship you might be eligible for, but the actual application won't be sent to you until after you are accepted into the program.
And for SkillBridge, what do we say? Anything different for scholarship, filling out the
For
scholarship?
SkillBridge students, yes, if you need something for your command, I can put something on letterhead for you to let them know which scholarship you would receive. That's a little bit different because they need something sometimes in writing ahead of time.
Indeed. And yes, to respond to what Travis said here, like I said, type in, how to maximize VR&E. If you're going to go to a VR&E appointment, you'll find a ton of videos that are, I even found one video for VR&E that was a former VA counselor who worked at VR&E, and she did a whole like 30-minute talk on how to make sure that you get VR&E. So there's a ton of resources available out there. It's just that none of it comes from the VA.
Right.
Just as long as you're aware, there's a lot of resources. Just don't expect the VA to tell you how it works, even though it's a great program. I mean, it will help you. It will do a lot for you. They just don't make it very clear how to do that. That's not to say the information isn't out there. You just got to find it. Anything else? Any questions at all?
Hi guys, I do have a question. When is the next cohort or the next start date?
The next available start date that this particular guided application will be starting or preparing you for is February 3rd. That is our Zulu platoon. So that is the next available cohort if you are in this class. It's important to note for everybody, if you're here and you don't want to go to Zulu, that's perfectly fine. You can continue going through this class. You can continue using it, use it to learn, keep going and use it for the next one. You can go to the next one too. But yes, the February 3rd cohort is the next. And on our website and I'll share it here in a second, but we do have a calendar page that's linked off of the main menu. I'll share it in just a second as soon as I find it. But Zulu platoon February 3rd is the next available. We'll put this in here. Oh, somebody already shared it. Travis has got it. Yeah, so that will give you, and you'll see different guided classes as well. So those guided classes that are listed below the cohort dates, you can sign up for those other guided applications. Those are going to happen 3 times per year, the way we have it lined up to come before each immersive cohort. But that doesn't mean you can only go to the immersive cohort. It just means that that's how they're lined up, and we can't really run more than that. Zulu isn't listed on the site anymore. Yeah, so that's because if you're not in this class, then you're not going to Zulu. So it's Zulu, the application window has closed for everyone outside of this class. This class is designed to help you get to Zulu, but if you're not here, the application window is closed. Hopefully that makes sense. We're not taking any latecomers because all the latecomers are here. And this is where all the cool kids are.
Hey, Greg, forgive my my inability to remember anything, but the Zulu cohort is the full-time one, or is that the part-time one?
Zulu is full. Yeah, it's immersive. And on that question, note that on the wording on these, we don't call them full-time and part-time, and there is a specific reason for that. They're immersive and evening and weekend. And the reason for that is because our evening and weekend program is not part-time, and it's not part-time by VA standards. This becomes very, very important to all of you if you want to do the evening and weekend program and you want to use some type of VA benefit, it is classified as a full-time program. So we don't call it part-time for a very specific reason. Just in case anybody is thinking about that evening and weekend class in the future and they're thinking about their VA benefits, rest assured we did that specifically for that reason.
Nailed it. So when does the evening and weekend classes start?
The next one is April 7th. So
Okay.
April 7th is Hotel Platoon. And yeah, April 7th through October 18th.
Okay. So this right now is for the I know you said not full, the immersive one for the everyday. What do the hours look like out again? I think maybe if we're gonna get in that, I don't have to answer it yet, but
so for the immersive program, you're looking at very, very full days. You know, we tell people to expect 10, 12-hour days even. It's a full boot camp model experience. So, you know, Monday through Friday at the very least. Roger is an alumni, so he'll be able to better answer that question than I can. But yeah, we tell everybody to kind of expect to give up most of your life for, you know, those 15 weeks.
Yeah,
right, thank you.
I'll add to that, Greg. So you can expect Monday to Friday, from the hours of 8:30 to 5:30, right? 8:30 to 9 is usually kind of like our stand-up. We would check in, talk about what we're gonna discuss. You know, you talk to your teams and whatnot. The class goes from 9 to 12. That's our allocated curriculum time. We then have lunch from 12 to 1:30, and then from 1:30 to 5, it is you know, individual work time or group time depending on the day. And then from 5 to 5:30 is our stand now, where we do a recap of what was covered. And we have, you know, some little code demonstrations, but you can expect a full load throughout the entire day. And then, you know, you will have assignments, you know, that will be given to you guys so you guys can work on your own time as well. So yeah, it's a full course.
Thank you.
Minimal pull-ups required though, just FYI, minimal pull-ups.
Can you clarify as well, Greg? If you're going through this program as well, this is also for the evening and weekend program hotel. Is that correct?
Yeah, you mean for a guided application?
Yeah, if someone didn't want to go through the immersive program, this is the specific guided application process for the evening and weekend hotel program.
Yeah, they can absolutely use this to apply to hotel, absolutely. There's no reason why, yeah, it's the same application process, whole deal.
Yeah, this is, if you complete this course and you are accepted into the program at the end of this course, that acceptance is good for any future cohort, immersive, evening and weekend, or DevOps for the next year. So
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. Do we have any other further questions before we move on with today?
Current pre-work, Roger, I think that's a question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what this is for you guys. I understand that sometimes when we're coming through these programs or when you start learning code, it can be a little overwhelming. Not knowing what path to take, what language to learn. I mean, when I first started coding, I just got a bunch of books of all types of programming languages because I didn't know what to start. The guided application process program itself will kind of guide you through that. So if you take part of the guided application process, you will, essentially receive all the tools you need to get accepted into our program. And it's going to be focused around Python, very basic fundamentals. So if you're struggling with pre-work stuff, the guided application program will help you with that to bridge that gap.
And on that note too, and I'm going to share it in the chat here, as I've told several of you, we put everything we do up on YouTube. And so I just shared the playlist of the last time that we ran this same program. The guided application used to be called Quick Pass. So that link that I just shared is the playlist of those classes when we ran that, I think 3 or 4 months ago. So please don't hesitate to take to our YouTube channel and use the resources that we have. Roger is recording this, so this will end up on YouTube as well, and all of the classes. So there will be plenty of time to go over exactly what he's covering. We have a ton of resources on our YouTube page.
I see a comment on the chat. Should we take this guided application in conjunction with the pre-course? Right. So upon completing the guided application program, you should be eligible for our programs. And then you will be given a pre-course curriculum by another instructor, which we'll discuss about later. And that pre-course or pre-work will be to get you prepared for the programs that Platoon offers. We also have an optional Foundations of Programming course that you guys are welcome to take. But the guided application program will give you everything you need to take part of Platoon's programs.
Hey,
All right, if we have, go ahead, Marianne.
thank you, thank you. I have a quick scholarship question. If if I had to opt for the evening and weekend class for this year, would I be able to like qualify for another scholarship to do like the fully immersive course at a later date?
Well, the curriculum is the same, right, Greg, for both?
For the
Evening and weekend and immersive.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
wouldn't be eligible to take both classes.
Right. The only different class would be DevOps. So some students have participated in the full stack and then decide they want to go on to DevOps. In that situation, you will be able to apply again for another scholarship.
Okay, okay.
Helps.
The reason why I even asked this question was because from what I understand, the evening and weekend class, we don't get a certificate of completion, right?
No.
You do.
Something that was self-paced where you don't get a certificate of completion. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Maybe I'm just making it up.
Self-paced.
Well, but
then
self-paced is not
pre-work.
the evening and weekend, right?
Self-paced is pre-work, so you're doing
Yeah, that's
that.
different.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yep. Okay, that's where my mind is. Okay, thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up so we can get into some code. If you guys have any further questions for Greg, Tish, or Catherine, I believe they have dropped their emails in the chat. Do we have any closing comments, guys?
Not for me. Like I said, if you're skill bridge and you haven't reached out to me yet, please do. But otherwise, like I said, I've spoken with most of you already. Just dig in. This is what you're here for. You're there. So let Roger take the wheel, and I got nothing else. Tish, Catherine, you got anything?
Nope, just hope we see you. Hope you pass the course. Hope you get accepted. Hope you get a scholarship. I hope to see you in Chicago. Bye.
Yep. Nice
you
meeting
all.
you all. Look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care.
All right, moving further with today's class. For the instructor for the course, that is myself. So my name is Roger de la Garza. I am a United States Army veteran with 8 years of service as a combat engineer and paratrooper. I am a Co-Platoon alumni. I took part of Co-Platoon's programs using SkillBridge. I was a part of Uniform Platoon of the Full Stack Immersive program. I am currently also the programming instructor for Foundations of Programming, and now the instructor for Guided Application. I do have 2 years of coding experience, and I was a former analyst for Accenture. I was essentially in your shoes not too long ago. I was in the Army and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I've always wanted a career in tech. At the time, we had Vet Tech. So, I went to the Vet Tech website, which led me to Co-Platoon. And Co-Platoon gave me the resources to be where I'm at now. So, have any questions for myself or my experience with Co-Platoon? Awesome. I do also have another guest with us today, which will be here for the remainder of the course, and that is Tristan. Tristan, do you mind coming on camera? Tristan is our teacher assistant for the course. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Tristan.
Hey everyone. I was also in Uniform Platoon with Roger. I also did TA for both Victor and Whiskey Platoon, and I went through the evenings and weekends DevOps course as well. Yeah, I did about 7 years in the Marine Corps. Went through Code Platoon. I've been here for quite a while, and I just enjoy giving back to the company that helped me out so much.
All right, awesome, Tristan. Thank you very much. Tristan is our dedicated teacher assistant for the remainder of the course, so he will be here in the shadows listening to your questions in the chat. So if you have any questions about anything that's being covered throughout our class, drop in the chat and Tristan will answer it as soon as he can. And I'm getting some questions here about the completion of the guided application classes, right? Maybe there's some confusion on what exactly is the guided application program. Well, it used to be where when you came to Co-Platoon, you had to administer a pretty daunting coding assessment, right? Where it was 10 coding challenges that you had to complete. You needed to complete, I believe it was 8. You had to pass 8 tests out of the 10 tests for each challenge and complete all 10 coding challenges to get accepted. And what we came to find out was that was a little overwhelming for new developers, right? What was happening was that, people will kind of start, they will be on their own, and just like I was in the same shoes, where you didn't know where to begin, right? if you're fairly new to tech, you might be a little confused. Like, how do I start this? What programming language should I be learning to become a software developer? And you didn't know how to begin. I first started, as I mentioned to you guys, I went to like my nearest library and I found every single book I could find about coding, right? I'm talking C#, Java, Python as well. And I was reading different books that, wasn't really telling me anything because I didn't know how to apply these skills. So because of that, Platoon updated their admission program. And instead of leaving it to the students to kind of just figure their way through these coding challenges, what happened was they were reduced to 3 challenges. And instead, we created this program here to walk you through everything that you need to learn to be successful within our course. So to keep you guys from, losing your way through your journey, the guided application course is there to guide you throughout the entire way, from the very basic core fundamentals of coding to have a solid foundation to start our courses. We are going to be running our class Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. The schedule might shift a little bit depending on holidays, but they're running from 6 to 9 in the evening, where we will sit here and talk about coding. I'll share the link right now about the curriculum and how we're going to talk about it. You don't need anything for the program that's extensive. You don't need a brand new computer. Honestly, you can probably run most of the stuff you're going to do over your phone. Now, it might not be, the best, but you don't have to be a tech wizard. You don't have to have anything crazy installed on your computer. The entire curriculum for the guided application process is in Jupyter Notebooks, and we're going to talk about how to actually get that opened up on your computer. So let me go ahead and kind of get this started. If you guys have been accepted into the Slack channel, you will find at the very top of the Slack channel bookmarks. And within the bookmarks, you can find all the links that will be important to you. We have the attendance form, which we would fill out before we start class. Attendance is not mandatory. If you guys miss days, that's okay. Highly encourage that you guys watch the recording the following day. We also have the curriculum for the course linked here, as well as the YouTube channel where we're going to upload all the recordings and the Zoom channel link. Now, to access the curriculum, you're going to go to the bookmarks and open up the curriculum repo. I'm going to go ahead and drop this into the chat. I understand that some people have probably not been added into the Slack channel. And what that's going to bring you to is going to be something very similar to this. This is a GitHub, which is known as a virtual, a cloud that keeps track of code file documents to allow to distribute to other people, to keep track of your work, to collaborate with others. And this is where you'll find the entire curriculum. As I mentioned, you don't have to install anything. What I recommend you do is go here onto the button, the green button of code, and you're going to see this pop up here where you get a URL link to this repository. Now, repository is just a fancy name for a directory or a folder of different files. What I recommend you do is copy this URL to your clipboard. And within GitHub, if you guys do not have an account, I recommend you go ahead and sign up for GitHub. This is what you're going to use for the programs. I'm aware that some of you guys have probably been using Replit. You can use Replit if you like. If you have other, third parties, websites that you guys have been working on to run your code, if you already have VS Code, you can do that as well. But GitHub will allow you to do all this without installing anything that's very fancy. All right, so on GitHub, if you go to Codespaces, or honestly, if you just Google GitHub Codespaces, it should take you to the same location that it's going to take me to. But in Codespaces, once you actually log in and get started, it'll take you here. Right, Codespaces is going to allow you to create almost like a sandbox where you guys can write some code and work and learn along with the class. In here, we have some blank templates. The entire curriculum is written in Jupyter notebooks, which was initially created for research. But we're gonna go ahead and start with a blank canvas, and we're gonna click on use this template. And it's going to generate for you that little sandbox, an instance of an environment where you can write some code and run it in real time. For those of you who are familiar with VS Code, this should look pretty similar to your application if you have it. If you aren't familiar with VS Code, it is very helpful to get familiar with it. It's what the curriculum for all our programs is running. Here you can just go ahead and choose your theme. I'll choose the dark modern, and we go to next section. And then we have something like code with extensions, right? You're gonna click on browse popular extensions, and it should open up your marketplace. If not, you can just click on the extensions button right here, and it should open up the search bar. Let's just mark this as done so we can get it out of the way. You can click on the extensions, and what you're going to do is you're going to type in Jupyter. Extensions are essentially just add-ons, very similar to how when you add extensions to your toolbar on your browser. We're adding an extension to this sandbox to allow us to run the code that we want to work on. What you're going to do is you're going to choose the very first item that pops up when you search in Jupyter. We're going to see a variety of different options, but we're just looking for plain old simple Jupyter. Notice that it also has the highest downloads. You're going to go ahead and install that. And let's go ahead and install that extension in this little virtual environment that we have created. So Jupyter is now added into our virtual environment. The next step is to actually open up something within our file here. Let's see, where is it? File, new file.
Hey, Roger,
Work.
you're going a
Yes,
little too
ma'am.
fast for me.
Okay. Yeah, let me take a step back, right? So,
Okay.
for those of you that do not have, a GitHub account, go ahead and make an account on GitHub. Let me see if I can go to home. When you make your account, you'll be prompted with something very similar to this, right? And essentially what GitHub is just an application that you can store different folders and directories of your code. In here, you're gonna go into code spaces, and it'll allow you to create a sandbox for where you can work on the curriculum.
Hold on. So, all right, I'm in GitHub, but we go to code spaces, and then I get kind of lost. Do I need to finish starting an account, or
Yeah, you do want to have an account. So finish making your account so you can have access to the rest of the features that comes with GitHub. Does that answer your question?
yeah, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, no problem. So within here, you go to code spaces, and we want to create a blank template.
Hey, Roger,
Yes.
maybe you want to wait here and just kind of poll the room and find out if everybody has their GitHub because you're bouncing forward again, and maybe they haven't finished opening an account.
Yeah, so we can definitely do that. Was the curriculum not given to you guys via email with a pre-course? It should have been within the email. Did you guys not receive the email with the pre course?
I didn't get anything talking about this. I have a GitHub account, so it doesn't matter for me. I'm actually pretty good, but I didn't get anything referencing setting all this up. So maybe everybody else did, but I didn't.
Yeah, so if you guys can't fill up your GitHub, that's okay. That doesn't have to be done today. I was just walking through here to give you an option. Another thing that we can do is we can go ahead and go to Jupyter. What we really just need here is somewhere where you can write some code and kind of follow along. So it doesn't have to be GitHub specifically. If you guys have different options like Replit will work just fine, or we can go to Jupyter. And Jupyter will give you the option to try out Jupyter itself in your browser. So instead of going through the whole process of GitHub, you can also do this. And you'll see here, they're going to give you an option to create an environment for Jupyter notebooks. All right, you're going to click on Jupyter Notebook. We'll choose the Python one because that's what we're going to be running. And you'll get something very similar to this. The only thing you guys really need for the class itself is just somewhere where you can write code, right? And the way that it'll work will be something very similar to this, where we are going to open up a new notebook. And then within the notebook, it's going to ask you to select a kernel. And this is what's going to allow you to read your Python code. And we're going to choose Python for this. And that's all you really need to set up a Jupyter notebook. You see here that we have a blank canvas. We have a little section here, which is either called a markdown or a code block. But the main point of this is to be able to write something like this, where we want to write some code, and then we want to run our code. And you see here that it gives you back a response. So whether you have GitHub working, whether you have an account or not, whether you're using Jupyter, whether you're using Replit, either or does not really matter as long as you have some form of environment to run today's lecture. Does that answer everybody's question?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, can you
Yeah,
run
no
through
problem.
how you got to the where you can type?
Yeah, of course. So one last time before we move forward with this, we're gonna go to Google. And in Google, just go ahead and type in Jupyter to open up the Jupyter website. And it should be the very first website here, jupyter.org. You can also just go ahead and skip that part and just press try Jupyter. But let's go ahead and go into the homepage. And it should bring you to something very similar to this. All you're going to do is click on try in your browser. It's going to give you different options of versions of Jupyter. We're going to be working with Python. The entirety of this course is based off of Python. So we're going to use the Jupyter Notebook with Python here. We're going to click that. And it should bring you to something very similar to this. Now we can create a new file by going here and opening up a new notebook. Or, yeah, actually let's do that because we have some default stuff here which we don't want. On top, we're going to click File. We're going to say New and open up a new notebook. All right, it's going to bring you to a blank canvas like this. It's going to prompt you with a kernel. Now, what is a kernel? Well, think of it as a way for your computer to talk with you or for you to talk to your computer. So Jupyter Notebook is able to be used in different languages. What the kernel does, it almost works as a translator, right? It translates what you're putting into this document, so it knows what you're trying to tell it. All right, so we're choosing Python as our kernel. And you should have a little block here, which is known as a markdown, to allow you to kind of write some code here. We can say print. We can say print hello. And we'll talk more about this and how it works. And then we can run this. And you see that it works, right? It's printing out hello. And you can continue adding more code here. Print hi guys. and it allows you to run the code as well. Oops, I have an error here. You see hi guys being printed out. So the only thing that Jupyter Notebook is doing for you guys is providing you with an environment so you can go through today's lesson. Does anybody have any questions before I continue with the code space portion?
I got a quick question. So for the last couple of months, I've been doing like beginner Python coding, but we've used Idle. Now I know that's a downloadable software, but is there, other than being downloadable, is there like a true difference between that and this in Jupyter?
You've been using an IDE.
IDLE.
Yeah. So the real difference is, for one, if you have a downloaded program like that, it does give you, a bunch of different options and features that are, great with working with it. You can still do, when it comes to coding and running some code, both will do the same thing. Stuff like VS Code or any of these IDEs, those are, big packages to allow you to actually create actual programs. We're not going to be creating any programs here. We're honestly just going to be running a little bit of code. And the only thing that we need is a platform to run that code. So no real difference here. You can use either or, whichever one is your personal preference will work just as fine. Make sense, Mary? I'm gonna take your silence as a yes.
That's a yes. I'm sorry. Thank you.
No problem. All right. So whether you're using Jupyter Notebooks or not, I'm going to go ahead and go through walkthrough of the code space so you can actually load up the curriculum here if you would like to do that. Let's just go ahead and mark as done. We talked about the extension, but I was looking for this window right here, right? So I'm going to stay here before I add the extension. You're going to go ahead and click on clone Git repository. And it's going to open up this search bar at the very top. If you remember, we copy and pasted the URL path for the curriculum. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that here and press enter. It's going to tell you to create some kind of virtual folder. Just press enter again or press OK. And you'll see here that's going to clone that curriculum into this area. And it says, would you like to open the clone repository or add it to the current workspace? Well, I want to open it. So it go ahead to grab that curriculum and it sets up my code space. And if we give it a little bit, we'll see that it's going to populate the entirety of the curriculum so we can walk through it. It's a little shy, just give it a bit.
Roger, I'm so sorry. It's probably going to be a lot of this, but I am trying to get off of the template page where you can select whether you want dark or high contrast or light.
Click mark as done.
Where can I find that? I'm not seeing it.
It should be if you scroll to the bottom.
You scroll down all the way to the bottom left. It's light blue hyperlinked text.
Correct.
God damn, thank you. Thank you.
No worries, no worries.
No problem.
All good.
I do highly recommend, if you guys have any questions, please do refer them to the chat. That's, for Tristan, so he can answer, only because we do have 43 people in here. So I would like to get through the class. Nothing against you, Mary. Thank you for your questions. They're greatly appreciated. But we have some limited time. And it's taking a hot minute. Let's go ahead and refresh this again, see if it does anything. There we go. See it's loading some stuff up. We'll give it a bit to load the repository. But while this loads, what it should give you is something like this. This is the actual VS Code application. Notice that they're very similar. It's just a different light scheme, which is why it looks off. But what that's doing for you is loading up the documents so you can go through the lessons if you like with the actual VS Code. So whichever one you decide to go through with it, you can do that here. Which is why I was trying to go through the code space so you can walk through the curriculum as well. But if not, you don't have to do that. As long as you just kind of walk through with me, you see what I'm doing, and you code along on Jupyter Notebooks or on Replit, either one will work. I have a question from Billy.
I got to the blank page that you're on where I missed the step where you pasted the link or did the repository. How do I do that?
It's at the very top. If you find a search bar, if you have it, you want to paste it there. And if not, I believe Billy, is that your name? You have a very interesting nickname on your Zoom.
Yep.
Billy? Okay, awesome. Yeah, Billy, if that doesn't work, that's okay. I would do it at a different time and just use Jupyter Notebooks for now. Or after class, we can kind of walk through and I can help you with that if that's okay. But either or, whichever one you guys end up using, this could be no real difference. This one just allows you to follow through with yourself with the curriculum. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna use my actual VS Code application. And it seems like a lot of you guys did not get the pre-course, so we'll do a quick walkthrough of the pre-course to see what you guys had in store for yourselves, and just ensure that we cover what we can. So, course overview, as I mentioned to you guys before, the guided application program will allow you to go from, I would be hesitant to say 0 to hero, but just enough to get you into the program and be able to be successful within our course. So our program will teach you everything when it comes to problem solving, actual Python skills, working with data, and so on and so forth. You do not need to be a tech expert at all whatsoever. I try to answer as many questions as I can, but if we don't have time, I'll gladly stay here a little bit later than means answering every single one of y'all's questions. We have the course module here. The lessons are split up on days. Today's lesson was supposed to be data types and methods. We'll try to get to that as best as possible due to the lack of time today. But notice that every single lesson is split up between every day that we covered. And the last week will be using everything that we learned throughout the program to do some mini projects. And that'll be like the culminating event to see how far you come within this last month. The introductions, as you may already know, my name is Roger. My real name is Rogelio, but some people tend to struggle rolling that R, so Roger is just fine. We have met the Platoon support team. You guys saw Greg today, as well as Tish. Their emails are also on the curriculum. If you didn't get them earlier, you now have the link to the curriculum, so you can always come here and grab their emails if you need to contact them about any questions in regards to the program itself. Guillermo, he's not here today. He will be present sometime next week. Guillermo is going to be your pre-work coordinator. So if you guys decide to move forward and actually take part in Platoon's programs and you get accepted upon completion of this program, you'll be working with Guillermo during your pre-work time, and he will help you kind of bridge the gap between guided application and the immersive program to ensure that you are ready to be successful. He will also be the person that's going to be running your live technical assessments. All right, so on top of having to go through the guided application program, we still have to ensure that your time through here, actually paid off. So that will be roughly between 45 minutes to an hour of a live technical interview where you will be prompted with some questions about code, and you will be coding in front of him, and he will be you can see if you accept it or not. Quick pass tool. I forgot to edit this. Guided application tools. As you guys may know, Quick Pass used to be the old name for this program. Can you guys hear me? It says my internet isn't stable.
You keep going in and out.
Hello, test.
We can hear you.
Awesome. So yeah, as you may have known, Quick Pass was the old name of the program. It is now called the Guided Application Program. And these are some tools that are going to help you be successful throughout your time here, and honestly for the rest of your time with Platoon. Slack is our primary means of communication. You should have been added to the Slack code space already, or environment. I believe most of you guys got added to the general channel. For those of you that were not added to the actual Slack channel for QuickPass, it should have been an email sent to you guys this morning with the Zoom link and the Slack link. If not, please remain here after class and we can add you real quick. Slack will be the primary means of how I communicate with you guys, whether you guys have questions about the code that was covered the day prior, what's going to come up, whether you can attend, if whatever reason I have an accident and I can't show up, that's where I will be communicating with y'all. I believe no email and no Zoom link today. Thank you for that. I'll get with marketing and figure out what happened there. Visual Studio Code, that's your integrated development environment, right? Your IDE. That's a program that we're going to be using a lot. That's what I'm working on right now. That's what we generated within GitHub. You do not need VS Code for this program. You don't have to download anything. As you saw, we worked through Jupyter Notebook to open up some kind of environment that'll allow you to do everything that you need to do without having VS Code. So no need to download anything if you don't want to. That's perfectly fine. So no need for VS Code, but it is helpful if you want to orient yourself to the program itself. Jupyter Notebooks, this entire curriculum was created in Jupyter Notebooks. Jupyter Notebooks was originally created for research purposes, and it was used for us as a way to make a curriculum that is kind of user-friendly to people that have not been exposed as much to technology. I understand we all come from different ways of life, so Jupyter Notebooks makes it a little bit more readable and human-friendly to you guys, so it's not as intimidating seeing a bunch of different code. So Jupyter Notebooks, you already saw that web browser, how I show you how to set up some kind of little environment so you can work. So utilize Jupyter Notebook as you like. When working with Jupyter Notebooks, you have something that's called a code cell block, right? And it's pretty much this exact block here. There's two different blocks. There's a code cell and there's a markdown. A markdown is what I'm using to have text, right? So if you click this, I can add text in here and it formats it so it makes it readable, or you can create a code cell block to actually run some code. So it gives you two different options to use it. If I wanted to add another block, you can see here when I put my cursor between these two blocks, it gives me the option to add another markdown or to add another code block. They look fairly similar, but their purposes for them differ. So keep that in mind. Right. And you probably won't understand if you're looking at this, if you're new to coding, but essentially this is just a little code cell example. And when you have code within a code cell block, you can run it. And you see here that it has an output for whatever the code is trying to do. All right, so we can run code in real time. Notice that the markdown block does not have that option. So there's a difference between both of these. We talked a little bit about GitHub and GitHub code spaces. Once again, GitHub is a remote repository. Think of it like a cloud that's storing a bunch of folders or files, so you can share, collaborate with others, or keep track of different versions of your code. It's very common amongst the industry. So if you have already familiarity with that, that's great. If not, you will later as you proceed to the course. We talked about code spaces and how to set that up so you guys can use code spaces if you like. I believe it loaded already. As you see here, we have pretty much everything I have in my VS Code application. By cloning that repository, I have access to it there. And I can even run the code here. All right, so if I scroll down to that section where we have the code cell example, I can press run. Oh, it's telling me it needs a kernel. All right, so just like Jupyter Notebooks, it asked me for a kernel. Because I'm using Jupyter Notebooks here, it needs a kernel as well here. Once again, what is a kernel? It's a way of translating your code into something readable that the program can understand, right? We see here that it wants me to install the Python extension. So I can go ahead and install that. That way it knows how to speak to Python. And now that Python's installed, I should be able to click select kernel. It's not giving me the option. Let me go ahead and run this again. Installing. Okay, it's not finished installing. Jupyter extension. There we go. So now that I'm here, I can choose Python environment. It will just take a while to load everything that I've been doing. I can click on a Python environment and notice that I now have that Python extension that I added, Python version 3.12.1. Right, I'm gonna go ahead and click that. And you see here that the kernel, it went from select kernel and it repopulated to the Python version that I had installed. And now we see that it printed out the result of this code. So if your Jupyter notebooks on the code space is not working, it's because you need that Python extension, or the Python extension to add the kernel. So this is the exact same as me using the downloaded version. The reason why we teach you guys code spaces for this program is because to actually set this up can be a little extensive. And that'll be done when you guys come through the program itself, right? Guillermo is going to help you through the pre-work to set up your virtual environment. That's if you guys get accepted. Now, before I continue moving forward, time is 7:07. We take 10-minute breaks every hour on the hour. So let's go ahead and return back at 7:17, and I'll stay here within those 10 minutes to answer any questions that anyone might have had that I couldn't cover during the lecture. Thanks, Tristan. I might do that again, so guys, remind me if I don't. But yeah, so this is not too important to record because you guys should have, what should have happened is you guys receive an email with the curriculum so you can go over the course. Unfortunately, you guys did not, so I do apologize. But this is stuff that should be done prior to today. I'm still covering it so we're not all confused. Programming language. So what is a programming language? Essentially it's just another language, but it's a language that a computer can understand. So if you are bilingual, if you're a linguist in the military, right? Programming languages, we've seen that people who've been linguists in the military are actually very successful with coding because they share very similarities, right? Programming languages is what the computer can hear, right? Obviously, it can't listen to us when we speak to it, and what we developed was, specific programming language that the computer can understand. It allows us a way to talk to the computer. We use Python once again because it's going to be one of the most easiest languages to learn. It's very human readable, right? What that means is, take example, the print method I used earlier, right? I literally want to print something out on my screen, right? And the grammar, or what we call the syntax of the language, is very easy to understand. If you've been learning JavaScript, you're probably familiar with console.log. That's not as readable as just using a print method, right? So print is essentially the same thing as console.log that that JavaScript has, but for Python. And that's why we teach Python as our language to start off with, also because we're going to use it, but it's very easy to pick up. If you'd like some more information about Python and how it came to be, you can check out the Wikipedia page for Python. Python syntax, lesson 1 will speak a little bit more about it, but syntax, as I mentioned earlier, it is the grammar or spelling of the language itself, right? Just like when you're in English class, in elementary school, middle school, and so on and so forth, there is specific grammar of how sentences are written. Languages, programming languages, expect a certain format, right? And that's what we call the syntax, right? The syntax helps to reduce runtime errors, but also there is a standard way of talking with that language, right? So there's always has to be some form of structure, as we see with real languages. So does programming languages. Here we see an example of Python comments, right? So there is ways to add text into your code that isn't ran the moment you run your program, right? And by doing that, we utilize the hashtag. So when this runs, you'll see that this line won't run, but lines 2 and 3 will, right? Because there's no hashtag that prefixes this lines of code. Then we also have, after this line of code, we have another hashtag, and it says everything left of the hashtag will be executed, right? What this is doing, when we run this code, what your interpreter is doing is reading line 1, it sees the hashtag, and it knows, hey, I'm not gonna run this. This is not code. This is just documentation or normal text, right? We see here when I run this line of code, we have a list here, right, of numbers, or what we call integers, of 1 through 5, and then we print that list. And if we see here, the output of that print statement is everything that was within that list. Notice that it did not run the first line or the text that came after the list variable. I covered all this in lesson 1 more in depth, so I'm gonna kind of just go through this. We'll cover this in a little bit. Reserved keywords, right? So there's some keywords that Python uses that you should not be using, right? Here we have this module, and module is just a fancy way of describing a script or a Python file. They're importing a Python file called keyword, and they're printing out everything that's within this keyword file. We see here, it gives us a list of all the keywords that Python has in its record, right? False, true, assert, await, break, classes, continue. All these words here are words that you want to avoid when creating Python code. So what does that mean? Well, if I created a list here, where's it at? Right here, we have this list called my list. It's called my list because the word list is a keyword that's reserved for Python. So we don't want to use keywords to name different variables that we have in our code. We use my list to separate, the keyword to something more unique to us, right? Usually you want to name stuff a little bit more meaningful. If this was like list of integers, you could call it list of integers, right? Not just my list, because what kind of list is it? What is that list holding? What importance does it have? But we don't use keywords as ways of naming different things. We want to ensure that we give it our own personal naming convention. Python also has built-in methods, right? So these are some methods that already come with Python, and we utilize these methods to our advantage. Some of the built-in methods you guys already saw was the input method. We see here, this input method allows us to take an input. The message within it is enter what you want right here. And what this will do will prompt you with a text bar to give it input in here. But where does input come from? Like, is Roger just pulling this out of nowhere? No, this comes with Python. When you guys install Python into your computer, or when we selected that kernel on Jupyter Notebooks or on Codespaces, we install the Python extension. We are essentially installing all these built-in methods that come with Python, right? Another built-in method is your print method to print some form of text out into our screen. There is another built-in method that you probably saw on the code cell example, which is time. Let's run this. For some reason, Jupyter Notebooks does not like the input method, so it's not going to work. Unfortunately, let's go ahead and stop running that. But yeah, so These are built-in methods that you can utilize, and you're going to be using the print method a lot. The input, not as much, but it is helpful to know. Python libraries. So just like Python comes in with some pre-built methods that you can use, it also comes in with some libraries. A good example of a library is something like a math library. A library is just another name for some kind of folder or file that has some code already in it. So instead of rewriting the code, we can take advantage of libraries that come with Python to utilize that code in our own code. I wonder if I can click this link. There we go. We have a list of libraries here that are from the Python documentation. For example, here is a max library. This max library, you give it multiple numbers and it'll return to you the greatest number within it. How does it do that? I don't know. It's already pre-built. You don't have to know how it's built. All you need to know is that it works, right? So there's some Python libraries that you guys can utilize. A good example is a datetime library. Python has some pre-built libraries that allow you to get the date and time of the your current location. So there's libraries that Python gives you that you can use for your advantage. The rest, I'll let you guys read it now that you guys have the curriculum for the pre-course. At the very bottom, you're going to find some interactive learning platforms. You have Codecademy, Free Codecamp. I'm sure some of you guys are already familiar with it. If you guys have been working on coding challenges, you've probably seen LeetCode or Code Wars. These are some good learning platforms that you can utilize. If you need some additional curriculum, some video tutorials as well, and then the actual documentation for coding, right? My favorite one here is W3 Schools. If you open it up, it's essentially a web page that tells you different stuff for different languages or even frameworks. If you go to Python, you get here a list of different Python stuff that you can learn about. We can check Python strings, and it'll tell you about Python strings, and you can even try it out yourself. It opens up a kind of a virtual environment where you can test out the different methods and you can run it. So you have different method or different websites that you can utilize yourself. We also have some book guides here if you're into JavaScript or Python, as well as links to GitHub. Stack Overflow is a forum that you guys can utilize where other programmers go and talk about their code. If you're ever having issues, you can come here and you can probably post your issue and people can help you solve your problems. Or if you're having an issue, you can come and look it up. Usually probably somebody has already encountered that issue, so they can help you with that. So Stack Overflow is a very common web page that you can utilize. HackerRank is another item like LeetCode, and then you have your tool and editors like Git and VS Code that we talked about. Now, let's actually get into today's lesson. Once again, that pre-course, I highly recommend go back and look through it so you don't miss anything out. But let's actually get into today's code. Here's the table of contents. If you guys are using CodeSpace, you can click on the links and it'll take you directly to that part of the lesson. The very first thing we're going to talk about is Python syntax basics, right? So I mentioned to you, lesson 1 talks a little bit more in depth of what we were talking about in the pre-course. So what is syntax, right? So that's essentially the rules or structure of the language. That is the spelling, right? The grammar rules of Python. That is how Python is structured, so it understands what you're trying to tell it, right? If you've ever gone to a foreign country and you try to use the language, but you use improper grammar, they're not going to understand you. Same concept here, right? If you do not use the rules for Python, the syntax rules, you're going to get a syntax error. And that's what syntax is. So why is it important? Well, first and foremost, it ensures readability, right? It creates a standardization for other developers to be able to work on the same type of project and understand what the code is doing. And then it prevents runtime errors. What that means is if you have good syntax, you shouldn't be receiving any errors when you run your program. What you guys will probably be encountering the most as brand new developers is syntax errors, right? That's probably gonna be your biggest headache. I'm sorry, my dog's in the way. Go away, boy. That's busy. Most of your problems are going to be syntax errors, right? Because you probably added an apostrophe somewhere, or you didn't use a method as it should have. So solidifying your knowledge in the syntax of Python will allow you to remove a lot of that headache. Now, if you're familiar with JavaScript, you've probably used curly brackets for your code blocks, right? Python does not use that, right? Python uses indentation to separate its code blocks, right? So instead of putting those curly brackets to isolate your code in a specific location, the way that Python is going to interpret different parts of your code is going to be by the indentation of your code. Typically, it's easier if you just use the tab. That'll automatically give you the default formatting of the indentation. The actual spacing between your indentation is 4 spaces. And if you don't have those 4 spaces, you're going to get a syntax error. And we'll see that at work in a bit. Some rules of indentation and common errors is indentation must be consistent within the same block. So if, there's one line of code that's indented 3 spaces and not 4, you're going to get a syntax error, right? If it's 5 or more, you're going to get an error. It's usually by 4, so 4, 8, 12, so on and so forth. The more nested your code is, the more indentations that you'll need as you dive deeper into your code. So instead of curly brackets, we use indentation. And here we see some examples. So here's the correct way of doing it. I'm going ahead and I'm clicking into line 2. If I move my arrow key, I can move it 4 spaces, and you'll see that it is actually properly formatted. Here is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right, so there's 4 spaces between the code. Whereas this one here, this is 4, but line 3 is 2 spaces. And when we run the correct version, my kernel, there we go. We see here that it runs perfectly. It prints out what should be printing out. If true, print the following. It prints it out successfully. But on the incorrect version, when I run it, I get an indentation error, right? Unindent does not match any outer indentation level. So it doesn't know where this code is supposed to be running. So just keep that in mind. Yes, use tab. It'll save you a bunch of headaches. Don't be using spaces. Now, we talked about comments earlier. So what are comments? Actually, before I move forward, does anybody have any questions about what's been covered so far? I don't want to move too fast.
Just speaking for me personally, for the moment, I have none, no questions.
Thank you. How do you pronounce your name? Kyujin?
Yes, Kyujin.
Kyujin. Okay, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So back again to comments. What are comments? There are lines of codes that are not executed, right? So usually documentation. They're very powerful, guys. I highly recommend get used to writing comments, especially if you are working on a project that it's months long. If you try to come back to the project months later and you try to read your code, 10 times out of 10, you're not going to understand what your program is doing. All right, so comments allow you to add some kind of documentation to explain what your code is doing. Notice here on this single line comment, have print hello world and have this as a single line comment. You can add, this is a greeting, whatever your comment whatever you want your comment to be. But to write single line comments, you use the hashtag as mentioned before. And as someone mentioned in the chat, to have multi-line comments, they use 3 apostrophes, or I'm sorry, not apostrophe, 3 double quotes. This allows you to write multiple comments all between the quotes. And if we run this, we see that hello is printed out, but lines 1 through 4 are ignored. Same thing with the single line comment. It prints out hello world, but line 1 is ignored. All right, so comments, very powerful. Highly recommend using them, especially when you guys are working with your coding challenges. If you want to ensure you understand what you're doing in your code, sometimes it's good to write some pseudocode. Now, what is pseudocode? Essentially, it's like commented code, right? Where you can kind of go through here and just write some code that's not going to run, but just kind of give you an idea, like a skeleton framework of what you're intending to run in your coding program. So it's always helpful to use your comments before you actually start writing some code if you want to break down what you're trying to do. All right, variables. You guys have heard me use this word already before, but what is a variable, right? By definition, essentially a variable is a named location used to store data in memory. I wish I could open this up a little bit more. Maybe if I zoom in. Right. We saw a variable before, like my list or greeting. Essentially, what a variable is, what I like to think of it as, is a box. Right. I think that's the best way of explaining it to new beginners. It's a box that holds different values, whether it's a word, a string, or it could be a number, which is known as an integer. It's kind of decimal point, a boolean, which are true and false, which we'll elaborate more about later. But a variable, I like to think of it as a box that holds values, and this box has a name, right? We named this box so we know how to identify it. Well, that name itself, it has a memory location, right? And it looks something very similar to this, where it's just a bunch of random numbers. That memory address points to somewhere in your storage where it's saving this variable or this data type, right? So a variable, I like to think of it as a box that holds some kind of data type, like the string here of my name, Roger, right? And the name itself is the memory address. Think of it as URL paths, right? When you guys go to, Instagram.com or Facebook.com, that URL name is the name of that URL path, but the actual address for that location is some kind of IP address, right? It's numbers and decimals, right? That's what that really is. The name itself is what we use to kind of give it a nickname to make it easier to find, but that name is linked to a memory address, right? And that's very important to know. So declaring variables. Once again, if you guys are familiar with JavaScript, you probably use something like let or const, or older versions of JavaScript using var, right? That's how you declare your variables. Python does not need that. It used to what's called dynamic typing, right? So unlike programming languages, as it was, let me take a little bit back. Ignore the dynamic typing part. It doesn't need let or const or var. All you need to do is give it the name of your variable, right? You don't need that. Now, there's other languages like Java. If you guys have ever used Java, before you declare a variable, it typically wants you to give it a type, right? If I was creating a string, I would have to add string and then the name of my variable to let my compiler, right, or essentially my interpreter in Python, know what it's doing. Python does not need that. You don't need to let it know, hey, this is going to be a string, right? It doesn't need to know, hey, it's going to be a decimal. It's smart enough to know what you're trying to give it because of its syntax rules. So we don't need any of that fancy, declaration of the variable type. It uses a dynamic typing to know what it is, and you also don't need var, let, const to declare your variable, right? Here we see 4 different variables: age, name, price, and it's valid. They all hold different data types. Integer, right? That's your numbers, right? As I mentioned to you guys before already multiple times. Integer is what we call the numbers, right? The age is of integer type, right? The name is of type string, right? Strings are created using the double quotes or just single quotes too sometimes. Floats is your decimal points, and then we have Boolean, which are true or false, and they're all being assigned to their individual variable. And then we print out here, I'm printing out 2 of these, I'm printing out name and price. And when I run this, what the ID method does, it gives me the location of memory of what these variables are located at. We see here that there are different variables and they differ a little bit by the end, right? They're not the same memory address, but you can actually find where it's located in your memory. So every single variable you declare has its own location, its own memory address. Do I have any questions about the variables?
Is the actual location of the variable, like the ID of it, is that important?
It is not. I just wanted to show you that the variable is an address, right? It's a memory address.
Cool.
You don't need to know it. Anybody else? All right. Naming variables, right? These are naming conventions. So when naming your variables, you want to begin with a letter or an underscore, right? You don't want to start with like numbers or, you know, weird characters like exclamation mark or $sign, hashtags. You want to start it with a letter or an underscore. Very rarely you use the underscore. The times you'll probably use the underscore to declare a variable will be when creating your classes, and that's a little bit out of scope, but essentially, if you guys are familiar with Java, you probably are familiar with using the private method, right? It's essentially privatizing a variable so only specific things can have access to it, right? Python does not have that. If you want to privatize a data member so other parts of your code does not have access to it or other people don't mess with it, we use the underscore as a prefix to kind of tell people what it does. It's more of a semantic meaning, right? But usually your naming variable should be a letter for the 99% of the time or an underscore in that specific case. Your variable should not contain spaces or special characters. Now, when coming to your spaces, if you want to use different words in your variable, like my list, if you are familiar with JavaScript, you've probably seen something like camel case, right? Where the first word of your variable is lowercase, and then every other word after that is, you know, capital letter. We don't do that in Python. Now, you don't. It's not that it's wrong. It's more of a kind of like an understanding that this is how we write our variables to differentiate different languages, right? We use underscores between the names of our variables, right? And we see that here on the isValid variable. There's two different words. So to separate the words, we use the underscore. And that's what we call it snake case, right? You know, because of Python, right? So we use underscores. You don't want to add special characters, once again, into your naming variables. Case sensitivity matters, right? My capitalized N name is not the same as all lowercase my name. If I were to create two different variables, these would be two different things. Or if I create my name and try to call it by using this, and I'll show you. If I say my name is equal to Roger, and I try to print my name in all lowercase, I'm going to get an issue here. Notice that it doesn't recognize it. It says it's not defined, right? Because these are not the same things. So naming convention does matter. By switching the N to a capital letter, it now recognizes a variable, and it runs it and prints out the name. If I run this without the variable, I get an error, right? My name is not defined. So the case sensitivity does matter when trying to call different variables. Avoid Python keywords. We talked a little bit about it using if, while, class, functions, all those variables that you saw or names. You want to avoid those. Once again, in Python, we tend to use snake case. I put snack. I'm sorry. I need to update the curriculum. You might encounter some typos in here, but notice here for my name, my age, my amazing variable name, they all have underscores. Con or wrong, no, the syntax is a little bit different, and we'll get to that at a different lesson. Constants. What are constants? Constants are variables that you typically do not want to change in your program, right? Variables like gravity or pi never changes. So how do we let the other developers know that this is supposed to be a variable that should never change or be updated? Well, we use all caps, right? Notice that pi and gravity are all capital letters. That allows other developers know that, hey, this is a constant variable and should not be changing. All right, so That's what a constant is. Right, so you want to use constants to store fixed values used throughout your program, and also you want to put constants at the top of the script for easy reference. So anything that does not change at any point of your program is going to be in all caps, and typically you want to put it at the very top. Do I have any questions on variables or constants? Whether you're following along or not, it's okay. I do have, like I told you guys, I created an exercise for the day, and I'll be creating exercises for all the days where it'll run through everything that we cover with some small exercises that you can do yourself. So do not fret if you're not walking through this. You will have some way to try this out on your own. Data types. So constants can change. Yeah, so that's a good question, Joshua. So yeah, technically they could change, right? It's more of a naming convention that we use to let other developers know that, hey, this probably should not change. This is always going to be the same. There's no reason why gravity is going to be updated, right? Gravity is something that's already set. So is pi. It's a pre-formatted number already. Who knows what the ending of it is? But certain stuff like that we don't want to change. Now, Python data types. So you've heard me use words like string, Boolean. So what are there, right? So the first one we're going to cover is going to be your Boolean type, right? That is your true or false, right? That's what a bool is. It's just true or false. Your integer is your numbers, right? Notice that we use different names for numbers and decimal numbers, right? English-wise, you would call a decimal number just a number. We don't call it decimals or a number, or we don't call it floats, right? We just call it numbers. Well, in Python, it has a specific name or a type, and integers, numbers are called integers, and decimal values are called floats, right? A floating decimal point. So remember these are two different things. Integers for numbers, floats are for your decimal numbers, right? One is whole numbers and one is not. String. Strings are your words, right? This is like names, any kind of text, characters, right? Strings are words. They are a sequence of characters. And then finally, we have the none type. None, which we can elaborate a little bit more later, is just the absence of data, right? It's neither a string, it's neither an integer, it's just the absence of data, right? Nothing or non-existent. And you'll see the none type probably later on throughout your coding journey. When you guys create a function and you don't return a variable back, you'll see that you'll get like a none type error. That means that it's not returning anything. So none is just the absence of data. Here, we see a line of code. We see 1 plus 3. What is this? And then what is this? What type of data types are both these?
Numbers?
Integers.
The first one is integer. What's the second one?
String.
It's a string, right? So although we both know that these are technically numbers, with the syntax, what this is telling me is that this is a string form of a number. And if I try to run this where I'm trying to do 1 plus 3, I'm going to get an error, right? Unsupported operand type. It's saying that it cannot add an integer with a string, right? And that's very important to know, right? So if you try to do some kind of math with strings or integers, even though we know 3 is actually technically an integer, because it's wrapped in quotation marks, what that's telling Python is that this is a string, so it's going to act as a string. Now, how do we fix that? Well, we have something called casting, or more commonly known as type casting. Think of it as, a magic spell to convert a variable into a different data type, right? And we do that by wrapping that data type around a method. Right here on this line of code, we have the original 1 plus 3 of a string, but notice that the 3 is now wrapped around an int wrapper, right? We call this a wrapper, right? The wrapper is of integer type. So what this is going to do when this run, it's going to get 1 plus, it's going to see that we're calling the int method, and within the int method, we're passing the string of 3. Python's going to know, hey, I'm going to grab this string, and I'm going to try to convert it into an integer. And then I'm going to add these together. And we see this, we run it, and it gives us 4. It successfully took that string number, converted it into an actual integer, and it did the math. What happens if I do 3 as a word? Someone take a guess what that's going to do.
It's gonna spit an error because like spelled out THREE is considered a string.
Correct. That's technically a word. It's not smart enough to be able to read this and know, hey, this is actually the number 3. So it's going to give you an error, right? That's why I said try. It's going to try to grab that number, and it's going to see if it's a valid integer type. And if it is, it'll do the math. If not, it'll spit an error. Next, we have this variable here. We have this variable named myVariable, and we're assigning it our float, right? A decimal number. Underneath it, we have the same variable that's holding that data type of 34.45, and we're wrapping it around a type method. What this is going to do for us, it's going to return to us the type of whatever this data type is within this variable. If we run this, you see here that it prints out float, right? It's able to take in a variable. It's going to choose that variable, grab the data inside of it, and by using the type method, it's going to tell you what the type of a variable is. And this type is of type float. So that's one way of checking the type. So if you ever confuse what is this, what a variable is holding, you can always use type to figure out what it's doing. All right, next we see here, we have 1 plus float with a string of 3. What do you guys think this is going to do?
My guess it's gonna give us 4 because no.
4.0 maybe?
No, it's gonna be an error.
It's
Yeah,
going to give us
4.0.
Yeah, it's going to give us 4.0, right? So it's smart enough to be able to differentiate between integers and floats. But because we wrapped it around a float, instead of returning an integer, it's going to return to you the number in a float format, right? So it is smart enough to differentiate what a 3 and a 3.0 is, but it will convert it into a float because it's wrapped around the float method. So it still works, but notice that the output is not the same as when we wrapped it with the integer, right? Because it converted it into a different data type. So we were able to cast this 3 into a float. So it went from an integer into a float. So you are able to change different types. Here's another one. We have string with 1 inside of it, and we're trying to add the string 3. Who can take a guess what this is going to do?
13.
Yeah, it's going to give you 13, right? It doesn't add strings. It's going to join them together when using the plus operator. And when we run this, it takes this number 1. It has the string wrapper around it, so it converts it into the string of 1. It takes string 1 and string 3, and it puts them together, joins them to return to you the string of 13. Right? It does not use math. It joins strings together. Now, here's the limitation when it comes to typecasting, right? Here we have the string 4.56, but if we try to use the int wrapper around it, we're going to get an error, right? It says invalid literal for int, right, with base of 10. What that's saying is that it's not a whole number. It doesn't know what to do with the 0.56, so it returns to you an error. Now, if I have 4.00, oh, actually gave me an issue. My bad. I thought it was going to give me something else. But yeah, it doesn't know how to convert floats to integers, but it can't convert integers to floats. Do I have any questions on the data types before we move forward? Or anything about typecasting? Are you able to add that string to another integer? Yes, I can, Lemuel. If you're referring to this line of code here of string 1 plus string 13, we definitely can do that. I can say, let's save this into a variable. We'll say my string is equal to the output of this, and then we're going to say print, I'm going to print out my number is, and I'm going to add the value of my string. And if I run this, we see here that my number is 13. Let me add a space here for formatting. There we go. We're able to join two strings together. All right, so you can do that, Lemuel. Do I have any questions before we go on a break?
None for the moment for me.
Awesome. Time is 8:04. Let's go ahead and come back at 8:14 and we'll continue with today's class.
I can't hear you.
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
Guys?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Awesome. I apologize for that. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and talk about Booleans. And Booleans, as we mentioned before, is your true and false. Booleans allow us to compare different variables and check if something meets that condition. And the best way of seeing it is with some code here. We have a variable called current temperature, which is set at 67. And it's a little out of scope for today, but we have an if or else statement, right? We're checking if something is one thing. If not, we'll do the other. All right, so the first check here is we're checking if current temperature is less than 68, right? The statement compares the current temperature to the number of 68. And what this will return is going to be a true or false statement. If so, then we create a variable called heater on and we set it to true. In the event that this does not pass this check, right, and this ends up being false, we set the variable heater on to false. And we can go ahead and print heater on. And if we run this, we see that it returns true, right? Because 67 is in fact less than 68, heater on was set to true, and we print heater on here at the very end, and heater on is currently holding the value of true. Right, so Booleans allow us to set true or false values, and we can set comparisons using it. Right. Next is going to be numbers. Right, the two types of numbers, and as we talked about earlier, is whole numbers and your decimals. All right, we have the number here 23 with the type wrapper around it. So this can return to the type of data type it is, and we see that we get int. With the decimal point, when we run this, it returns to us floats. And then here we're actually doing some math here. We're doing 34 plus 6.5. What do you guys think this is going to do? Are we going to get an error, or will it actually do the math?
It'll do the
It'll
math.
do the math.
Yeah, it'll do the math, right? But because we added a integer with float, it's going to by default it's going to give you a float even if it is a whole number. So just keep that in mind. It's smart enough to know that integer and floats could be added. It takes 34 as 34.0 and adds a 6.5 to it, returning 40.5. Mathematical operators. We saw a little bit of that already using the addition of adding the strings and numbers, but we have other varieties of these operators. For the exponent, we're going to want to use the double asterisks, right? So thinking about 3 to the power of 2, we would do 3 double asterisk 2, and that should return to us 9, right? For exponents, we use double asterisk, but for simple multiplication, we use a single asterisk. And we'll talk through these as we go to the code. Here we see some math. It's not too complex, right? But it works in the rules of PEMDAS, right? So it tackles the parentheses first. So it goes 1 plus 70, and it gives you 71, right? And then it does the exponents. So 8 to the power of 5, which I can't tell you off the top of my head right now. And then it does the multiplication if there is any, or division. We see here that we divide 71 by 4.3, and then we add whatever the exponent was here. And with these operators, we're actually able to do math, right? And it returns to us the value of this math operation. Now let's simplify it a little bit more. Let's just say 3 to the power of 2, so we can actually see that in something simple. And we see here that 3 to the power 2 is 9. So it uses the double asterisk as exponents. We see division here. So how does division work? Well, if we do 5 divided, no, let's say 15 divided by 5, right? The forward slash is your division operator. And this returns to us 5, right? So there's 3 5s within the 15th. Notice that it gives us a float back, right? Division will give us that float back. Now, we have division, but we also have what we call floor division, right? And that's going to allow you to round down the result of your division. So let's say we do 15 divided by 2, no, not 2, let's say 2.5. If we do oh man, I'm horrible at this. 3.75. Okay. This is a horrible example. There we go. If we do 16 divided by 3.75, we see here a very weird number, right? 4.2666. Now, by using the double forward slashes, what that's going to do is going to do the division. We're going to round down and give us 4 instead of that, that weird number. So you do have the option of either dividing, get the more accurate response of what it should be, or if we want to round down a value, we can use the double forward slashes. Next is going to be the modulus, and that's represented by the percent sign, right? So these returns only the remainder of division, right? Once again, it returns only the remainder of division. So here we see 23 modulus 2. What result do you think this is going to give us?
1.
It gives us 1, right? Because you divide the 23 by 2, it should return to us somewhere like, let's actually return it. Divide it by 2, right? 11.5. It's not an accurate division. So what I can see from here is that 23 divided by 2 is not an even answer because there's a remainder afterwards, right? So it divides the 23 by 2. That's it fits into 23 11 times, which will give you your 22, but there's still a number left over. So the modulus returns to you the remainder of division. Right? It is a great way to see if something is an even number, which you probably encounter in some coding challenges. Right? 22 modulus 2 returns to 0 because 2 divides evenly within 22. We then see once again the division, 23 divided by 4. It returns to you the float variable of it, or a version of it. And that's your operators. Obviously, the addition one and subtraction are pretty straightforward, but these additional ones can allow you to do a little bit more than just simple math, right? We can get the remainder of division, we can round down, divide, and even multiply as well as the exponent of it. Now, strings, right, formerly known as string literals, right, are what we call immutable, right? Immutable data types. And what does immutable mean? Essentially, what immutable stands for is the fact that it cannot be changed, right? And you've probably seen something like, let's go ahead and comment this out. We see here like my string, and the string holds, or this variable holds a string called this is my basic string. What if I do my string is equal to this is my new basic string? Are these two the same? Did we change this string?
Yeah, we changed it.
We did not, Devin. What happened here is we essentially change the address of this string. We cannot change a string, right? This is an immutable data type. This cannot be changed, right? What this is doing is changing whatever this variable, my string, is pointing to, right? And we can kind of see that in action here. If we print my string and we wrap it around the ID wrapper, let's move that up here and down here. When we run this, right, the first time that we declare the my string variable, we have this is my basic string, and we print out its location in memory. And notice that the first time it was printed out, it's different than the second time it prints out, right? What happened is the string did not change; it stayed the same. It's somewhere, in your memory, but there is no way to access it anymore. By doing line 3 here, where we call the same variable name and added a different type of string, what we did was change, right, what this variable name called my string was pointing towards to in memory, right? So this string, technically, it still exists in storage, right? It's floating essentially in the void, right? It's just somewhere out there, but we have no way of accessing it anymore. This my string variable is now pointing to something else. So that begs the question, well, where is it and what happens to it? Well, when you change the value of a variable to a different string, that old value, it no longer has something that points to it. So it now makes it eligible for trash collection, right? And what your interpreter casually does as you're writing code and running your code, it clears the trash, right? So it goes through its trash, or think of it as a recycle bin, and it finds any kind of data that no longer has any use, right? And by changing the direction of where my string is pointed to, it no longer has any use. We have no way of getting to it. So it adds it into a collection box, right? And our Python interpreter casually runs this frequently and removes stuff from storage that no longer has any use for us. So strings are immutable. You cannot change them. By running these lines of code, all you're doing is recreating a new variable pointing somewhere else. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Question. I
Uh,
have a question.
yes.
How is it different from like the JavaScript of like reassigning a new value to like for example like my string, like in JavaScript, if you do like this is my new basic string, it's like clearly replacing the this is my basic string. You know what I mean?
I'm assuming you're referring to this like my underscore new string. This will not impact the original string, right? That still exists. This variable still points to the location in memory for wherever this is at. So that's how we create a different string, and whatnot. But if we try to use the same variable name that we used earlier, we no longer have access to this. This now points to something else. Does that answer your question, Mary, or did I not understand correctly?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. I do apologize if that wasn't a good explanation.
It's fine.
Yeah, so that's your strings. And strings are also a sequence of characters, right? And what that means is that you're able to almost work with strings as if they were a list, right? They're technically list of characters, right? This string here, Python, is a list of different characters, Python. And the way that we access the different characters within the string is by what we call index notation, right? When we create a string or the start of a string or a list, we don't start at 1, we start at 0. So here, if we want to grab the letter P, we will grab the character at index 0. If we wanted the Y, that would be at index 1, and so on and so forth, right? And the way that we access that is by using bracket notation. And we'll see that at play in a bit. Let me go ahead and undo these changes. There we go. And we see that here, right? We have the string, this is my basic string, and then we're printing out that string, but right after the name of the string, we use the bracket notation, right? We use square bracket, and we're passing in different values of 0 to 4. Every single one of these lines is printing out a different character in that string, depending on where that index is at. And if we run this, we see here that the first line, print my string of index 0, is going to grab the character at index 0, right? The very first start of the string, which is a T, and it prints out the T, right? And then we have the second line of index 1, and that is the H from this string, and so on and so forth, right? So to access different parts of the string, we're going to use index notation by using the brackets. And the brackets are going to take the index location of what you're trying to grab. Now, there is also another way of doing it. So the way that we discuss is the forward direction indexing. Well, strings can also use backward direction, right? If we want to grab the last item within the string, but let's say we don't know how long the string is. Let's say the string is like maybe 250 characters, but we don't know it's 250 characters. If I wanted to grab it by the index, instead of trying to count every single character, what I can do to grab the last item is by using -1. That'll grab me the very last item within that string. And then that works very similar to how we did the forward direction, where it increments every character afterwards. So -1, -2, -3. Now, what if I want to grab the T in the string? What index would that be if we're using backward direction indexing?
-5.
Why -6? Well, we also have to take into account that the dot, right, the period, is also a part of the string, right? So the dot is at -1, and so on and so forth, right? Another part of the string is actually the spaces, right? If I wanted to grab the C, I would go index 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have to count the space as part of the string, so that would be index 8, And then the C is at index 9. So something to take into account, right? So spaces, the characters, everything between these double quotation marks are part of the string. I see a bunch of guesses. Good try, guys. Good try. But hopefully that answers that question. String immutability. We also can't change a character directly, right? So here we grab the dot of that string, right? That's at index 1, and we try to equal it to an exclamation mark. Right? We're trying to change that last item of that string, and notice that we get an error, right? String object does not support item assignment. We can't specifically just change that one character in the string. If we want to reassign something, we will have to create a whole new variable completely, right? So strings are immutable. We cannot change them. But nothing stops us from redefining it, right? Here, this is my string was saved earlier, right? So when we do print my string here, it's able to track that we've called that variable somewhere else in our code. And it prints out this is my string. But then once again, we do the my string variable, but this time we give it a different string. This is my change string. And then by printing that out, it prints something different, right? Once again, back to what we discussed earlier, we cannot change the string. By reassigning it, we're giving it a new string, changing that address in memory. String operations and methods, right? So slicing strings, right? Slicing is just a fancy word of saying grabbing a specific part of a string from a start and end point, right? And we use that by using a colon, right? So here we have print my string, which we declared earlier, right? It's this is my change string data. And notice here that we call the my string variable again, but here, instead of grabbing a specific character in index, we give it 11:18. What this is saying, right, and using this as an example, I want to grab the start, which is going to be at index 11. The next number after the first colon is the stop, which is I want to go up to character 18. And we'll talk about the step in a bit. But what this does is gives me the item at character or the character at index 11, right? So if we count these indexes here, right? 1, 2, or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, right? That's index 11 is character C. And we want to get up to index 18. So we go from C, we go 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and then 18. Notice, right? Why is there not a space here if index 18 is supposed to be space? Well, the stop is up to, but not including. All right, so keep that in mind. All right, if I wanted to grab also that space, I would have to go and index past that to grab everything within there. And now we see here, the space is now populating, right? So the second number, the stop, is up to, but not including. And now we see here another item here, which is step. Well, what is step, Roger? I see this here, but I'm confused. Step is how many items we want to skip over, right? Let's say we change this to 2. When we print this, we get a weird response here, a CAGD. But what's happening here, it's grabbing the C, right? Because we started at index 11. We're going to go up to index 8. But by adding that step argument in here, we're telling it, hey, I want to skip 2 characters, right? So it goes to the 1, and then it goes to the it goes to H for the first one, and it goes to A for the second one. All right, so it uses 2 to step over twice. So the second time it returns something to me, it's grabbing the A instead. And then it does that again. For the next item, it's going to grab, it goes from A, and it goes 2 steps forward. So it goes to N, and then G, and then returns a G. It does that again and grabs D. All right, so the step is telling it how many times do I want to skip until I grab the next item within this sliced list. If we change this to 3, it does the same thing. It starts at C, So it go up to index 18, but as it goes through its slice, it's skipping 3. So 1, 2, 3, and it lands at N. So it grabs N. It skips 3 again. It lands on D, so it adds D. Do I have any questions on the start, stop, or step within the slicing?
Yes, can you do step -1?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's see what step -1 does. Okay. It's giving us some weird functionality here. This will work better if we do something like 18:11. Right, and it gives it to us backwards. D, E, G, N, A, and so on and so forth. Right. What we had earlier, by using -1, it's going to go backwards, but notice that we told it, I want to go up to 18. But if I'm stepping backwards, it's never going to reach the end, and so it never grabs anything. Right. The moment it starts at 11, it goes back 1, and it does not return anything. It goes back again, and it's still not within this range, so therefore it returns that empty string that we saw there. If you want to grab the reverse version of it, as you saw what I did 11:18. Oh, my bad, 18:11. What I'm telling this here is I want to start at index 18, which is a space, and I want to go up to index 11, and I'm going to go backwards. And it does so, right? It grabs the space because it starts at the 18, but it does not include index 11, which is C. All right, so start, stop, and step. Does that help? Joshua, you're asking, is there a way to find the index without counting each letter and space yourself to make slicing easier? There is, but that's a little out of scope when it comes to trying to loop to the string, so we'll save that for a different time. But as of right now, because we're not using any other methods, we're counting it manually. There is a way to find the index, and that would require us to iterate through the string using a for loop. And we'll talk through that when we get to for loops. All right, the next example here, we have the string again, right? And notice we have my string, but the first item on the left side of this colon is empty, and the right one is 4. What do you think this is going to return if we're using this string right here?
It's gonna consider like starting with index 0.
Correct, right? By default, if you do not add an argument to the first part of the slice, it's going to default to the start of the string. It's going to go up to index 4, which is this space here. So it does not include the space, but it returns to you index 0, 1, 2, and 3. All right. What if we do colon -1? Well, we didn't specify a start, so it's going to start at the beginning. We didn't specify an end, so it's going to grab everything all the way to the end of it. But notice that with a -1, we're telling it to go backwards. So it's able to reverse the entire string for us by using the colon -1. In return, this is my chain string, but it's completely reversed. This is very handy for those of you guys that might be doing like reverse a string challenge. This is a very one-liner simple method to solve that question. All right. If you do not specify the stop index, the slice will include everything from the start index up to and including the end of the string. So we kind of already saw that in action a little bit here. We're starting at -6. Obviously -6, it starts at the back, right? But actually -6, it goes before, right? Before the start, but it's gonna grab everything, right? This is my chain string, and then we grab -6, and it grabs the up to everything up to that part. Right, so by not adding something there, it's going to default either to the start or to the end. Do I have any questions about slicing before we move on with the next part of class?
I have a question. Like, for example, on that -6 that you did, can we do that, like, let's say, like -6 and then colon, and then let's say -4, so we can get the STR? Is that possible?
Yes. It grabbed everything because we didn't specify an end, right? So it grabbed from the -6 index, and it grabbed everything to the right. But by adding -4, well, notice that it's the stop is not, it's up to but not including. So we probably want to convert this to a -3 to get the STR. So yes, you can do that.
I see. Thank you.
No problem. All right. Reversion of strings. Oh, I kind of got ahead of myself. We saw this in action, guys. By not giving it a start or a stop, and then just giving it -1, it's going to step backwards, and that returns to you the string reversed. Next, I think this is going to be for practice. If you guys want to try this out, you guys can on your own. We'll continue with the curriculum because we're limited on time. All right, so we talked about built-in methods, guys, right? Well, strings have their own built-in methods as well in Python, right? And if you work with JavaScript, you've probably seen a little bit of it. There is some similarities, but syntax-wise, they do differ, right? For the string here, to capitalize a string, we use the dot upper method. Where in JavaScript, I believe it's like 2 uppercase or something like that. I haven't worked in JavaScript in a hot minute, so I'm a little rusty. But the dot upper, what that does is it takes a string and it formats everything within the string into capital letters, right? So we see here text initially has hello world all in lowercase, and they pass in text dot upper, and we print out the upper text. It returns to us the string all capitalized. All right, so we do have some methods like this, and we're going to talk through them very briefly, and just to see that they exist and how they work. But there is a lot more than what we'll cover here. If you guys want a more thorough explanation of these, I recommend using the resources that were added in the pre-course. If I sat here and talked about every single method that Python has, we would be here forever, and we just don't have that time. All right, but know that we do have a method called dot upper that allows us to capitalize a string, and vice versa. We also have the dot lower here. Notice here that the string has 2 capital letters, that hello and world, but when we use the dot lower method, it lowercases everything. Here's a very cool one, is using the dot capitalize. So we have the text Python programming, right? 2 different words within this string, and they pass in the dot capitalize method, and we run this. It's smart enough to capitalize the start of the string. Know that start of the string, right? It's not too smart where it's going to know that there's another word after this space, right? Because all Python knows is, hey, this is just all one string, and that's as far as the knowledge Python has, but it will capitalize the start of your string, right? So by using dot capitalize, we see here the result is capitalized P for Python and then programming. But here is the next one, title, right? Think about movies, think about names. If you don't want to just capitalize the front one, the dot title is where you want to do that, right? The dot title is going to take that, and with this dot title, it's going to know to split up the string with the spaces and grab anything that is of character type, right? And capitalize that for you. With a dot capitalize, it doesn't have that functionality for you. And going back to, like, oh, how does these things work, Roger? Just know that with the Python, the Python language, so it comes with these pre-built methods. someone was smart enough to kind of code this in the background to be able to go through this. Now, this isn't all magic. Keep that in mind. And when you get more in depth into coding and you start thinking about time complexity and how fast your code is running, this isn't just a magic method to get away from looping through your string and then finding a word to capitalize this. Under the hood, what Python is doing, it's grabbing the string, it's using some form of a for loop. And for those of you that are not familiar with that, we'll get more into that later. And it's going to do a for loop to iterate through every single item within here. It has the code to be able to split this up within the spaces, and then it matches that character. It's going to say, hey, is this a character type or is this like a special character? Is this integer or float? If it matches a character type, it's going to capitalize that for the very start. All right, so there is some stuff happening behind the hood. It's not just magic, but just know that you have two different methods that can do two different things depending on what you're trying to achieve. The dot strip method, right? The dot strip method is a way to strip your strings out of stuff that you do not want, right? By default, it's going to strip it by empty spaces. You're able to give it the option to remove, for example, let's say you have special characters in the end, like let's say there's like hashtags, and I will see it in action actually, instead of me trying to explain it. But here, this example is a string of this is some text, and notice there's spaces after and before the string. Well, by using the dot strip method, it takes that string and it removes the spaces at the end, right? Because by default, it's going to use spaces within the method. And we see here that it returns to us a formatted string with no spaces before or after. Well, let's see if we change these to hashtags. And here we add the hashtag on the strip method. Notice that the first time it prints it out, we haven't done any formatting, so it shows the hashtags. But the second time we run this, we're stripping it out of the hashtags and it removes the hashtags from there, giving us a formatted string, right? So the dot strip method will by default remove spaces, or you could specify what you want to strip from your code. Make sense? Moving forward. Next is going to be the starts with. Here on the starts with, we are specifying a string of hello. The string itself says hello, comma, space, world. And by using the strip method, it's going to look through your string code. It's going to look for the item you passed into this method, which is the string hello. It's going to remove it and format that to tell you, oh, it's true. We can probably, okay, I see what he's doing. It's checking, right? It's checking what it starts with. My apologies, I got these confused. It's going to check if it starts with hello, right? So going back to a booleans, right? Result true or false. If we change this to pi, it's going to use the starts with method to check if it exists within the string and returns false to us. And you can do the exact same thing with the ends with. Once again, there's so many of these guys. It's impossible to go through every single one of them. So if you're interested on what other methods Python has for you, you can look through these on the WG School, and I'll show you at the end of the class. The find method. This is going to go through your string and find if the specified input that you gave it is located within the string. And this is returning 7. Right? Why do you think it's returning 7? You could take a guess. Correct. It's returning the index. It's going to use the find method to grab the string and to look through the string. Hey, where is this? Oh, I found you. It's going to return the first time that it encounters it, right? The first time. There's 2 is inside the string. but it's only going to return the first time that it encounter the is within your string. It's going to return to you the index of where it starts at, right? The count, this is a very powerful one. You're probably going to use this a lot. We can count how long something is, right? Here, we're trying to count for the word Python within the text string. And Python, and why is it return 2? Is it the index it's returning?
No, it is the number of times that the word Python is in the string.
Yeah, correct. It's going to return how many times it encounters in the string, right? So we have Python here at the very start, and it encounters Python at the very end. So within this long string, we were able to find twice of that amount. If we change this to is, we'll probably get something very similar. Let's do a instead. A was found multiple times. We have a here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, right? So it counted 5 A's in here. Here is a very interesting one, actually, and I kind of want to see how this actually works. I have not tried this one out. The dot replace, right? It replaces all occurrences of a specified substring with another string. We have the string here of a date, right, in a string format. We grab that date, so we use date underscore string dot replace, right? Probably something I didn't cover. How do you use these methods? You use the dot. That lets Python know, hey, I want to invoke this method on this variable called date underscore string. And what I want to replace is I want to replace the forward slashes with dashes. Notice that we did a new variable called format string to print that out. What if we try to do date string? Let's also print these out. Print date string, and then let's print date string here. And then we're going to wrap this around the ID method on both of these. And let's see how that works with our memory. All right, so we're printing out the memory location for the string before we manipulate it. We then create the date string variable, but this time we're replacing the forward slashes, and then we're checking the memory again, right? And notice that these two are actually different. This ends with 6176. This ends with 0416. So although we're replacing something, once again, back to the principles, strings are immutable. So you're not going to find it in the same location. It recreated a new variable to a different place in memory. So replace isn't actually changing the string. It's kind of formatting the string, which is why we use a new variable called print formatted. Right, because regardless, it won't actually change the string, right? Strings are immutable. So we might as well create a different variable. That way we have access to both, even after we changed it. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's go through this real quick. All right. I think we have enough that we can probably cover tomorrow if we can squeeze it in. But we're gonna go ahead and stop here, guys. There's too much to cover within the time frame of 4 minutes, and I want to open up the floor for any questions. We'll definitely go through these very quickly during tomorrow's start of class to ensure that we get through the actual curriculum. You're more than encouraged to, go over these yourselves if you like. I mentioned to you guys at the start of class that there is a lesson 1 exercise. You are able to practice everything that was taught here from start to finish. Some of these are going to be very simple, right? And notice that it's because the course is formatted to a method for people who have never coded before, right? I understand some people might have already came here with already previous knowledge. So if you've been coding for a while on your own time, you might not find too much use in this unless you're new to Python. You've been coding with JavaScript. We do not have class tomorrow, Scarborough. But regardless, if you don't have knowledge with Python or you're new to programming in general, I think these exercises will be very useful, especially if you weren't coding along today. Use these to your advantage. I would definitely either open up CodeSpace or have this on the side while working in Jupyter Notebook or whatever you're using to practice these in. They get slightly a little bit more complex as time goes by. It starts very simple with printing something very simple. And then as you go deeper into the exercises, they get a little bit more complex. They're not too complex where they're probably going to put any kind of challenge, but it's more to get used to actually doing this. Right. Let me go ahead and stop the recording real quick.